there, my name is Cynthia Veronica, and let's talk about school accommodations. Let's just dive right in. I have a 4-year-old son who has achondroplasia, which is the most common form of dwarfism. And about a year ago, when we were looking into preschools, one key person that I spoke to in this whole process was the occupational therapist, or OT. And this is a person that actually had offered to, whenever it came time for us to choose a school, a preschool for Sebastian to go to, or actually for him to transition into because he was already at a different school, she offered to actually go visit the school and to make suggestions on what kind of accommodations my son would need. And so before I get too into it, first of all, an OT or occupational therapist is someone that we had free access to. Occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, those are some of the services that were offered to us once we got the diagnosis of our son having achondroplasia. And so for us, we had a couple different options for how we could get these services. One was the state. The state actually has a program through California Children's Services Medical Therapy Unit and also the school district. And then an actual third option was for me to actually go through my private insurance for those services. And I would still have to pay a copay. So either going through the state or going through the school district were kind of better options for me. And it's not just OT, PT, and speech therapy. Those are the services we're currently using, but there's actually a whole array of other services depending on your child's needs. So if your child needs feeding therapy, that was something that was also something that was offered to us, because at one point after Sebastian had his tonsils removed, there were some issues with him swallowing. And so, that's another service that you can get either through a state program or even through your insurance, possibly. It's just something to look into. So when I mentioned to Sebastian's occupational therapist that we would be starting at a new preschool, she did offer to do a walkthrough to see, okay, what kinds of needs would Sebastian have, what types of modifications could they make, if any, at the school to make sure that the environment was safe for him. So one very interesting aspect of all this was when I began the conversations with the OT about coordinating the school visit, she actually made it very clear to me that even though in public schools it's pretty standard to have an OT come visit, especially if a child has an IEP in place, this is standard practice, and the public schools are used to seeing the OTs come in and do their evaluations. Private schools, on the other hand, which is what my son was attending, they don't always welcome OTs with open arms. Even though they may be receptive to the OT visiting, they don't necessarily have to apply any of the recommendations. And with public schools, once the recommendations are made, in order to be in compliance, they do have to implement all of the recommendations within a certain amount of time. So that's a really big difference between an OT doing a walkthrough or sort of inspection at a private school versus public school. And so those are some of the challenges that you may face if your child does go to a private school. Of course, all of these recommendations are very specific to Sebastian, but I did want to share them with you anyway, just in case it gives you some ideas, and maybe it'll help you in helping your child to figure out, what kind of modifications you can think of for your child's classroom. Okay, so one of the first recommendations she made was to add a lower door handle onto the door. So the back door to the preschool, which led to the backyard, actually had this really big glass door with a horizontal handle, and it was this horizontal metal bar that was actually up high for adults to actually, push or pull to go in and out of the room. And she noticed that for Sebastian, he actually wasn't able to reach the door handle. And even some of the young kids, they really had to reach up high. And so she said, he can't do it independently. And what was happening, and we didn't know this until she did the site visit, whenever Sebastian wanted to go outside from inside the classroom, it was easy because all he had to do was push the door. But when he wanted to come back in from outside to inside the classroom, he would have to have someone help him, and he would say things like help, 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 and wait until either a teacher heard him or another kid. And so that's how he would get from outside into the classroom. And so she recommended that we actually get some sort of handle, like a shower handle. And we ended up buying this one that actually has suction cups. It's a shower handle with suction cups on either end. It was pretty hefty. And once we heard this, we just bought it right away. We didn't want to wait for the school to have to buy it themselves. So we purchased it and adhered it to the door, just below the handle. And it was a pretty easy fix. It ended up solving the problem. He was able to open it independently, and it worked out great. Okay, so the second suggestion was to move this mosaic table that they had that was right next to the door. Because it was right next to the door, all the kids would basically have to open the door a little bit wider just to get into the classroom. So the same glass door, not only was the handle too high for Sebastian, but he would have to open it even wider. And so she suggested, okay, once you have the lower handle in place, it would be good to move that table to another location if that's possible. And that way he can easily get in, and the other kids could easily get in without having to open the door too wide. Okay, so the third suggestion that the OT made was to add a handrail to a staircase that was in the classroom, and to add not just a handrail but also just a wraparound handrail. So the classroom was set up as such that it was there was a lower level and an upper level, and the lower level was where the classroom was, the main classroom. The upper level had the sinks, the bathroom, the snack area. So it was important for Sebastian to have access to not just the lower level, but the upper level as well. And so the kids had a method for going up and down stairs. They basically would go up on the right side and go down on the right side. Going down, they actually had a handrail. Going up, they did not. And so it was important to avoid him losing his balance and falling, for there to be not just a handrail, but one that was low enough for him to hold on to. The reason that the OT recommended that this handrail be a wraparound handrail was because the last two steps didn't have a staircase wall. And so in order to make sure that he still had something to hold on to, we wanted it to stick out just far enough and wrap around so that he would be able to go up the stairs while still holding on to something. And that way he wouldn't lose his balance and fall going up the stairs. So one other thing that the OT suggested was that the teacher move this basket that was actually at the bottom of the staircase. And she basically said it's a hazard there. It's not going to allow the kids to actually step down with ease. They're going to have to move over to the left a little bit, and they're not going to be able to hold on to anything while they're moving a little to the left while they step down the last couple steps. So that was something that she had suggested, and it was a really good suggestion because Sebastian ended up falling when that basket was there in the location where it was. So great suggestion by the OT. He did trip. It was a small trip, and fortunately he didn't get hurt, but it was something that was a concern for us. So moving the basket was a really good suggestion, and any obstruction that was at the bottom of the stairs in general would have had to have been moved. The next suggestion was actually to move a table that was at the bottom of the staircase on the other side of the staircase. And the reason for that was because she was recommending this wraparound handrail, and in order for him to be able, or any other kid to be able to move with ease, and for there to be enough room for them to step down, this table at the very end, at the very bottom of the stairs, would have been an obstruction. And so she suggested moving it a little bit further further out so that it wouldn't be in the way when the kids are walking up the stairs. So the next suggestion that the OT made was to put a handle extension on the doorknob that led to the bathroom. One thing that the OT noticed when she did her school visit was that whenever Sebastian wanted to access the bathroom, if the bathroom door was closed, and it usually was kept closed, he would actually have to talk to one of the teachers and say, can you please open the door? Or he would actually have to ask one of the other kids for help. He wasn't able to independently go in and out of the bathroom on his own. And so she suggested that she make some sort of handle extension, which she did, and she ended up visiting the school on a different day after she made it, and she put it in place, and it ended up working really great. And it wasn't just Sebastian that could use it, other kids that were on the smaller side could use it as well. So the next suggestion that the OT made was to make some sort of modification to the bathroom faucet knobs. One thing that she noticed was that for one of the bathrooms that Sebastian had access to, these faucet knobs were not very easy for kids to open in general, to turn on and off. And so she basically suggested that they either add some sort of handle extender, so that he could more easily open and close the faucets. So the next suggestion that the OT made was to lower certain items that were on shelves that my son couldn't reach. So she noticed that there were certain things like tissue boxes, for instance, that were up a little bit higher. And she basically said, okay, well, why don't we put them on lower shelves, so if Sebastian needs to blow his nose or if he needs a tissue, he can access it more easily. And that was a pretty easy fix and something that they did right away. Okay, so the next one is a footrest. One of the things that we were worried about was that Sebastian's feet would dangle when sitting in a chair, and that his legs would fall asleep, and that it would be a very uncomfortable position for him. So one of the teachers, actually from a different classroom, actually brought in a crate box, and she put it under his feet. And so whenever he sat at a table, they would put this crate under his feet, and he would rest his feet there, and it worked out really great. So I mentioned that the OT did a couple follow-up visits at the school, and this was mainly just to put the handle extension that she had made, but also just to check up on how Sebastian doing with these changes. Does he need any other modifications? Did she miss anything? How are the modifications working out? And one thing that she noticed was that certain things hadn't been implemented. For instance, the basket that she had recommended moving hadn't been moved, and that's a pretty easy fix. And she had initially even asked the teacher, is this, would this be difficult to move? And the teacher said, no, it's a pretty easy thing to move. Same with this table that was next to the staircase. It hadn't been moved. And these are things that I was very surprised about. And the OT even said, I'm really surprised that she hasn't moved it by now. And one thing that I learned just from talking to, I have a couple of different teacher friends, and a couple of them said to me, you know what, a lot of it is ego. A lot of it is, ego, because especially with teachers who are fairly new, and this particular one was new, teachers put a lot of work into setting up their classrooms. They have a lot of pride in how they set things up. And so when changes are recommended, even if it's for the better of the child, they feel very strongly that they had placed these items in these locations, and it's kind of a blow to their ego to get the recommendation to move them in a different place. And that's unfortunate, because I would hope that the child's safety and comfort would come first. So my kids are actually very young, so I wanted to share with you what I have learned from other parents of kids with dwarfism. And these are things that are very specific to their kids, but nonetheless, maybe they can give you ideas. These are things that have come out of Section 504 meetings. These are basically meetings where you go in, you talk to the school, and you basically come up with a plan that is specific to your child's needs. And what you basically have to do is think about your child's every single move while they're at school, from the time that they're dropped off to the time that they come home. What are they doing? What are they doing? What are their every steps? And how can you help them be as comfortable as possible in their environment and ensure that they have the accommodations that they need while they're at school? And for public schools, these accommodations are funded, so parents should not be paying out of pocket for any of these changes or accommodations that need to be made. So some of the things you'll need to think about are adding stools in your child's classroom or any other areas where your child may need a stool to access certain things that are hard to reach. Maybe they'll also need it in the library, in the bathroom, maybe the cafeteria. Think of those places. Light switch extenders is another accommodation. Your child may need extra time to get out of his or her seat and stretch. Riding accommodations might be another thing that you might consider for your child. With achondroplasia, trident hands is a feature. I've actually talked to teachers about my son getting thicker pens or thicker crayons so that he could actually hold it with more ease. Whenever your kids line up in a straight line, you might want to make sure that your child is in the front of the line so that he or she doesn't get trampled and so that he or she is easily seen. You can have a buddy that is assigned to your child so that when he's walking in the hallways, he doesn't get trampled. One thing I noticed from having done tours of elementary school is that hallways seem very scary. I've walked up and down hallways thinking, oh my goodness, if these hallways are completely packed, I would not feel comfortable with my child walking by himself, and I could see how he could easily get trampled. Think about fire drills. What are the protocols going to be for your child when there's a fire drill? This is another situation where he or she can easily be trampled. Going to the bathroom, wiping is something that's difficult for kids with achondroplasia. They have shorter arms. And so, some things that you might consider is maybe having him go to the nurse's office. Maybe if your school has a school nurse, he or she could go to the nurse, and from there, the nurse might be able to help with wiping. Or maybe you can have your child have some sort of tool and talk to the school about a system for, him or her using the bathroom, being able to wipe properly, timing for going to the bathroom, when is he or she going to go. All of these things need to be taken into consideration. In general, though, I think that it's just important for us as parents to be very proactive, to communicate constantly with the school, and to always check in. If you have your meeting with the school in the beginning of the year, check in periodically, make sure things are working properly, make sure things are being implemented the way they should be. Talk to your child also, ask them what they're comfortable with, if they may need more accommodations throughout the year, because you just never know, things change, and or maybe there's something that you may not have thought about earlier on in the school year that comes up later. Thank you so much for watching. Give a like if you got value out of this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.